Hey, say hi to everybody who's watching this. All right, cool. So what is the Renaissance actually? The Renaissance, I'll define it again so you want to answer it this way. The Renaissance means rebirth. Rebirth of ideas. Rebirth of new learning. The Renaissance lasted between 1350 and 1550. This period brought an enormous amount of change. Yeah, it's up there too. Brought an enormous amount of change all over Europe. And it got its start in the Italian city-states. Everything in life changed during the Renaissance. And the most important is it was a period of innovation and creativity after Europe had pretty much been, as far as creativity goes, asleep for about 850 years. So 1350, we see the Crusades end in the 1300s. The Renaissance starts after the Crusades. So again, it's a revival of art and learning in Europe. There's an explosion of creativity in art and writing. They bring back life and the culture of classical Greece and Rome. You see, the church still is very powerful, and there are still many, many paintings and many works that glorify the church. The majority do. Here we see, this is the top of the Sistine Chapel at the Vatican. The Sistine Chapel of the Vatican, Michelangelo painted this whole thing hanging from the roof on his back. Days, weeks, painting this work, hand by hand, doing every little detail. Here we see Adam being born, and there are scenes throughout the Bible on the entire thing. It is massive. The whole thing is covered. Michelangelo painted the whole thing. Absolutely brilliant. It's an amazing, amazing work. If you ever are lucky enough in your life, or if you study overseas or something, or able to travel to Rome, it's something you have to see. It is absolutely beautiful. So this kind of individual achievement was glorified, was promoted by people like the Medici family, who had money to pay artists to do this, or the church would pay these artists as well. And we see, a lot of creativity, sculptures, and you also see it's different in the Middle Ages, is the fact that, you can see a lot of nudes and stuff like that, and it glorifies the human body. All right, again, individual achievement, creativity in this life is valued. This is basically the birth of what's called humanism. Humanism. The belief that, yes, it's important to do what we can to get to heaven, but let's remember that this life also is important. That is what occurs during the Renaissance. And none of it would be possible without the ideas coming from the Muslim world, which had its glory aged from 700 to 1200. And that came in and sparked the Renaissance. Last slide. This one, you can't quite see the title, right? It says, How the Renaissance Changed Europe. How the Renaissance Changed Europe. All right, so beginning with the Crusades. Now, what happens at the end of the Crusades is pretty much, at the end of the Crusades, beginning of the Renaissance, feudalism dies in Europe. So feudalism, the idea again, I'll draw my bad castles on here that look like cactuses. Feudalism dies. The nobles lose their power. They have their castles and everything, and they still have their castles, they still have their titles in many places like England today, but it doesn't really mean anything. But feudalism dies because many of the barons, the lords, the knights, they mortgaged or sold their lands in order to join a crusade. And who was smart enough to buy their lands? Which new group of people? The merchants, the business people. The people like the Medici family in Italy and other people around who are smart enough to buy this land away from the nobles. So the nobles start losing their land. Thousands more of these nobles and knights, along with peasants, millions of peasants, die in Syria, die in Jerusalem, and the failure of their sons who are supposed to inherit this, they lose their money, and it goes either to the merchants or it goes to the king. So now we see a unique thing happens. The kings and the business leaders form a new alliance. Oh, this picture here, it means rebirth, like waking up. So, the kings and merchants, they form a new alliance, pretty much. It's kind of like they basically get rid of the nobles out of the picture. So the merchants basically take the place of the nobles. And this leads to the city-states being born. I'm sorry, not city-states, nation-states, nation-states. This leads to the nation-states being born. The private warfare of one person fighting another person, another noble, that ends. Because if you're a business leader, let's say you're a business person, and you have these castles. Castle over here, castle over here. I'm going to redraw this later. It's a horrible castle. But you have these castles in different lands all over the place. If you're a business leader, where do you want to do business? There's a simple answer to it. If you're a business person, where do you want to do business? There's a real simple answer. Everywhere. Yeah, where are you? Okay. Yeah, you want to do business everywhere. You don't care if it's this noble's land or this noble's land. You want everyone's money if you can get it. Does that make sense? So the business leaders, the merchants who are rising in power basically say, you know, these private wars that are going on, it's bad for business. So the merchants start working with the kings. The nobles lose some of their land by crusades. The peasants start leaving their lands because they'd rather work for a merchant or a business leader than work for, crumbs on a noble's land. So this starts to go away. So the society changes, and the merchants, they want their trade routes to be protected everywhere. They want to be able to travel throughout all of Europe. These merchants, these families who are like teaching their kids how to speak Latin so they can do business everywhere as Latin becomes the language of Europe. They want to do business everywhere. And so what they want is, they want the king to protect them everywhere. So the merchants and kings basically make a deal. Basically, the merchants say, all right, we got our businesses. Here's what we'll do. King, we will give you some of our sales in taxes. So we'll give you some of our money. And if we do more business, guess what? You get more taxes you can collect. Sounds good to the kings. Do the kings really like the nobles?
No.
Or the nobles more, to be quite frank, kind of a pain in the ass to the king.
Yeah.
They're kind of a pain. They don't really help the king at all. But the merchants say, we'll give you tax money. And you can control your whole territory. Now we see the birth of countries like France. Italy will start being born. England, United Kingdom will start becoming countries. And these are called nation states. See a place like France now where you got the king, and he's more interested in ruling the whole country. And the merchants are interested in, you know what? We will pay our tax money to you, but we want to become rich too. We also want to make our money, but let's both become rich. This becomes the birth of the nation-states, modern European countries. And this is how Europe goes from being one of the most backwards places in the year 1000 to becoming more advanced through trade, cultural diffusion, the building up of countries, which are basically becoming small empires. Questions about this at all? All right, a few more things here, then we'll be done. So these monarchs, or the kings, they use this money to build large armies. And they rebuild their countries out of them. They build their large armies. Now, what will also happen next is, around this time period, you see the Crusades happened from the years 1350 to 1550. Well, what happens in 1492 and 1500 and beyond? What happens at the end of the Renaissance? In the 1500s, what do the Europeans start doing? We can look at our timeline up here. The Europeans also start going where? They start colonizing and going to the Americas. So at the same time, these merchants are giving their money. The kings are building a large army. They have the weapons and technology they've gotten from the Muslim world. Now the ships start taking off for the Americas, especially from Spain, Portugal. They go to Africa, which we'll learn about. They'll go to Asia. What are they able to do when they get to these lands? We already learned about this in our research paper. What do? They conquer. Now flood Spain, for example, with a whole bunch of gold from the Americas. And are we going to have a pretty powerful country? And why do they win? Because they had like the bubonic plague. They had diseases, which the natives get and die. They have the technology, which was given from the Muslim world that they got. They have merchants, they have business, and they start becoming incredibly powerful. And this changes the world. This is how Europe begins to dominate the world. And it happens from the Crusades to the Renaissance. And this will begin an age of exploration. All right, finally, we also see population growth in Europe. The population in Europe from 1,000 to 1,500 doubles. From 1,000 to 1,500 doubles. There were 38 million Europeans in the year 1000. It's not that many, really. There were 38 million Europeans in the year 1000. There are 76 million Europeans in the year 1500. Better diets made possible through farming techniques, spices, these things. Hospitals, learning about germs and those things, which came again from the Muslim hospitals, allow for Europeans to live longer. Merchants are paying money, taxes to the kings, and Europe becomes a power. Spain, France, later England will start to dominate the world. You want proof of that domination? Most of us in this room speak one of two European languages. English and Spanish. Why? Spain took over who? Latin America with Portugal. North America was taken over mostly by the English. That's why I speak English. Because the English took over North America. Many of you speak Spanish and English because you were from an area conquered by the Spanish, and you moved to an area conquered originally by the English. Does that make sense? And that is where we'll stop our lecture on the Renaissance.